Hey, right before the break, I told you that we're going to have a very special guest today, and we sure are hoping that we are, in fact, going to have a special guest. You got him? All right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, folks, you are not going to believe this. This is an amazing guest for us to get here on the Morgan Streetman Show, and we're so excited to have George Papadopoulos on today. So let's go ahead and bring him on. George, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, you know, George, I just finished reading your book recently, Deep State Target, and I have to say that you've got just about the most interesting story to come out of this entire Russiagate thing. I mean, you were at the very center of all of it.
Yeah, it was an incredible story, and in retrospect, it's even more insane to think that what happened to me was actually going on in the middle of a presidential campaign season, which it was from the beginning all the way through the transition team, basically. So your observation's dead on right.
Yeah, and for folks who haven't read your book, give us just a brief overview, because you had originally worked for the Ben Carson campaign, and then you went to work for a group in London called the London Center for International Law Practice, and then you got brought into the Trump campaign as an advisor. And tell us about what happened, from there. Once you informed your current boss at the London Center for International Law Practice that you were going to be going to work for the Trump campaign, kind of at first he poo-pooed the idea a little bit, was my impression from your book. And then it seemed he got very excited about this idea and began to try to hook you up with certain people. So for our audience, tell us kind of what happened.
Sure, that's a great way to start the conversation. So there's a reason that the president, I was on Hannity, I think 2 weeks ago, I think, and I was mentioning the UK and Australian angle in the interference in the 2016 election. And the president, right before he went to Japan, started going on TV and talking about how Attorney General Barr needs to investigate the British and the Australians because so much of spying went through London. And this company that I was working for, as you call the London Center for International Law Practice, is a very mysterious company that reached out to me out of the blue when I was living in London. I was working on I had just left the Ben Carson campaign. I went back to London where I was working as an energy consultant out there for a couple companies. And they say, we want to make you a director here. And I said, okay, that's fine. I went there. The whole organization is filled with a lot of ex-Western diplomats, ex-Western intelligence types who are connected to the State Department, to the British government, et cetera. So it was a very, reputable type of place. But when I told them I'm leaving and joining the Trump campaign, they were horrified, basically telling me, what on earth are you doing? And then their antennas basically started to spring up, and they told me, before you go, you have to come to Rome with us, and we want to introduce you to some people. Now, as you saw in my book, the woman who introduced me to Joseph Mifsud, who is at the epicenter of the Russia hoax and probably why we're going to really understand the scandal a lot better, was Arvinder Sambe. And this woman worked with Bob Mueller directly after 9/11. She worked with the FBI in London, and she's the one that introduced me in Rome to this guy, Joseph Mifsud, who ends up becoming a fake Russian agent who tells me that the Russians have Hillary Clinton's emails, and apparently it's part of the reason why this whole investigation started in the first place.
And didn't he take you to wasn't it like a luncheon where he took you with a lady who he claimed was Vladimir Putin's niece? But when you got there, I mean, this lady didn't even speak a lick of English and clearly wasn't Vladimir Putin's niece.
Well, exactly. And there's a reason that Devin Nunes has delivered two letters, one to the CIA heads and the other to the president, to look into Joseph Mifsud. Because during the president's recent trip to England, Devin Nunes asked the president to find out if Joseph Mifsud was connected to British intelligence, which all the overwhelming evidence now suggests that he was. So you refer to this young lady he introduced me to, Putin's niece, the fake niece of Putin. It was clearly a setup. It was some sort of meeting that he wanted to have me partake in to make it look like I was dealing with Russians or talking to Russians so that he could later entrap me with this fake information that he tells me a couple weeks later.
Right, and he was the first one ever to say that Russia had Hillary's emails. That was kind of where that information started. Am I right about that?
Well, here there's a little misunderstanding about that. See, at the time, it was speculated all around the world that Hillary Clinton's State Department server was hacked. So when Joseph Mifsud told me, "Hey, the Russians have Hillary's emails," I simply saw it as him, validating a rumor that had been widespread throughout the world at that time. I never heard the word DNC. I never heard the word Podesta. So whatever he was doing, from what I've been told by various sources, and I think a lot of people now are discussing it openly on television, is that his role was to basically drop this fake information in my lap. He told it to me over brunch at a London hotel in front of many people. So clearly, it wasn't some sort of secret information. And then hopefully later on, one of these spies that you've probably been reading on the front page of the New York Times or on the news recently, Alexander Downer, Stefan Halper, and others, were there to try and retrieve what he told me. So the whole thing was very pre-planned, well-orchestrated, and a complete setup against the president and his team.
Wow. It's amazing. When I read your book, I mean, like you say, it's very apparent that they were trying to plant this information on you and then have another agent or another person come and retrieve it by having some kind of a conversation with you. And, I mean, they came at you so many different ways, George. It's hard to imagine. I mean, first of all, I'm so glad that they didn't actually get you, because it would have been, easy to make the mistake and slip into their clutches in a more serious way than what even happened to you. But talk to us about some of the other people who came at you, because, like you said, after Mifsud, I mean, the Australian High Commissioner, who's the ambassador, Alexander Downer, had a meeting with you. And then the walrus, Stefan Halper, later set up a meeting with you with his assistant, so to speak, Azra Turk, who we've talked about here on this show. And both of them, in my opinion, came at you, a little bit less than completely professionally. So tell the audience about that.
Yes. So the timeline is very important, and that's why my assistance in this book actually acts as the roadmap into the origins of this investigation. So on April 20th, 2016, I'm contacted by the Australian government while I'm living in London. Why the Australians reached out to me on April 20th, 2016, except to spy on me, I don't know. On April 26, 2016, Joseph Mifsud tells me this bizarre, unsolicited information about Russia and Hillary. On May 2nd, I am contacted by the DIA at the U.S. Embassy in London. These two individuals who I think are under investigation right now, named Gregory Baker and Terrence Dudley, as you saw them in the book. And after that sequence of events, Alexander Downer reaches out to me and says, "I would like to meet with you," through his assistant. I think his assistant, who had reached out to me 3 weeks earlier, says, "Would you like to meet on May 10th?" So when I get to this meeting with Alexander Downer, as you saw in the book, it was a very hostile meeting. I remember everything about this meeting because it was so bizarre. And the reason my book is so unique and why I was able to basically bring the reader into the room when these meetings is because when you have such meetings that leave an indelible mark on your memory because of how peculiar they are, that's why I was able to do it. And immediately upon sitting down with Alexander Downer, I never thought that this person was a diplomat. I didn't consider him a friendly diplomat. I saw him as some sort of spy. Now, at the time, did I know that he was spying on me for this nonsense with Mifsud, and Mifsud was likely working with him? Of course not. But what I did think he was spying on me for was about my ties to the energy business in the Middle East, Israel, etc., which later on, as you saw, Stefan Halper ends up spying on me for as well. So I saw Alexander Downer pulling his phone out, recording me. I didn't know what to do. He pulled out his phone numerous times. I ended up reporting him to the FBI and Bob Mueller. And something that many people don't understand, and this is probably something very unique for your listeners, is that Bob Mueller's team essentially confirmed to me that Downer was recording my conversation. So who sent Alexander Downer to spy on me, to record my conversation on May 10th, 2016, almost 3 months before the official launch date of this hoax? That's the question that people like Attorney General Barr are looking into. That's why President Trump went to the UK to find out who was running these British and Australian spies at me as an American citizen working for candidate Trump, and to get to the bottom of it. And, I'll say one more thing on this.
Well, hey, George, can I hold you over on that thought until after the break? Because we're coming up on a hard break. But I just want to say, what a bombshell you just dropped. They were spying on you at least 3 months before the Crossfire Hurricane investigation was even opened. So exactly how were they doing that? They were violating your Fourth Amendment. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We have got such a special guest today. We want to jump right back into it with him, and that's George Papadopoulos. And we're so pleased to have you on the show, George. And just before the break, you were telling us that you had kind of had some interaction with Bob Mueller's team after the fact, and you sort of learned from that Alexander Downer was recording you. So tell us where you were headed with some of that information.
Sure. So Alexander Downer, as I explained, and I felt immediately upon meeting him in 2016 that he was spying on me. I didn't understand exactly what he was trying to do with the information I was giving him because he was basically asking me a lot of questions about China, which he's actually a board member of this Chinese telecoms company that the president just banned from operating in America, called Huawei. He also was a board member of this private intelligence organization named Halakit, which Stefan Halper was actually a board member of too, hence why I believe this was all a coordinated operation against me. And third, he was basically talking to me about the energy business in Israel, which I was promoting American companies in, and he was on the board of an Australian energy company that was trying to operate there too, named Woodside. So this guy, Downer, clearly had motives to spy on me because I was stepping on his toes. I was getting very close to power, obviously, working with candidate Trump, and probably was going to roadblock a lot of his goals, and maybe his personal goals, and the Australian government's goals, and even the British government's goals. So it's very complicated. But in my book, I explain the motivations for why I believe he himself got involved in spying on me, and later on why the British as well were keeping very close tabs on me, to the extent that they ended up sending me Prime Minister Theresa May's letter of congratulations to President-elect Trump, to show me that, they were keeping very close tabs on me. And a lot of it has to do with my background. And you're going to see that moving forward as more things are declassified, that the main reason that I was being spied on by all these individuals was because of my energy background in the Middle East.
Well, that's right. And you were actually proposing kind of a reworking of the U.S. alliances in the Eastern Mediterranean. And that has a lot of effect on oil and gas pipelines, and there's a lot of competition for those pipelines, to control those pipelines and which countries those pipelines go through. And big countries like Turkey are really involved in that. And you had a really very interesting take on a way to rework the alliances in the Eastern Mediterranean to the great benefit of the U.S. and other democracies like Greece and Israel. That I know you've worked a lot with. And that's all in your book. And folks, I mean, we don't have time to cover it here on the show today in the kind of detail that it deserves. But I can tell you George's book is a very easy read. It's a fascinating read. It takes you right in the room with him and gives you a play-by-play on everything that was happening. And so if I could, I want to switch over because we had a couple of other topics we want to hit with you that all involve your story, and there are details we haven't even gotten to yet. So one of the details we wanted to touch on is after they'd already reached out to you with Alexander Downer, with the two DIA guys, with the walrus Stefan Halper, then there was a guy who came at you from Israel, which is a place where you have a lot of contacts and have tried to do some business and make some contacts. And he wanted you to fly with him to Cyprus and his name was Charles, and is it Tawel?
Towel, yes.
Towel. Okay, Charles Towel. So he wanted to fly you to Cyprus, and I've actually been to Cyprus myself. It's a very interesting little island. I spent my time down in Ayia Napa, as you might imagine, but you were doing business there. So you started out in Nicosia, and then you went to some kind of strange apartment hotel that was run by a Vietnamese lady, apparently, which seemed very out of character, and that's where Charles Towel tried to give you $10,000 cash, which, was a retainer, which is something I'm familiar with as a lawyer. And then you flew back to the U.S., and when you got back to the U.S., tell the folks what happened.
Yes. So this person, Charles Towell, if anybody is interested, you could simply Google his name, and you will see that he's been outed as a CIA source in South Africa. So clearly he has ties to the CIA. Mm-hmm. That's not innuendo. That's a simple Google search will reveal that. And you're absolutely right. He was proposing a business deal with me that was never clear, and he drops $10,000 in cash in my hand in a hotel room. And I was very suspicious about it because I kept telling him I want a contract. I want to know exactly what this is about. Let's set up a LLP or an LLC or a corporation and have a formal bank account. And he kept saying, no, let's not do it like that. So I flew to Greece. I dropped the money off with my lawyers there the day after or so. And I told Charles Towell, I don't want your money. Come pick it up. And he said, I don't want my money back. Now, why is this very important? Because just a couple weeks ago, there was a bombshell article that came out about Andrew Weissman coordinating with Cypriot authorities to investigate potential money laundering crimes of Trump associates. And I think that Charles Towell was actually a plant by the special counsel. There's a reason why when I flew back to the United States, I was arrested at the airport where they were looking for this money.
Right.
And also why up until my sentencing, not only was a special counsel trying to retrieve that $10,000, but they ended up fining me $9,500, which was the absolute maximum they could have fined me in order to try and retrieve the money back that way. Now, that money is still with my lawyers in Athens. I'm expecting the bar or Durham or Congress to investigate the bills, as I think those were marked. And should those be marked, and should that have been an entrapment attempt against me using a U.S. intelligence asset, Charles Towell, you're going to see a huge new can of worms opening up that America might not even be ready for, because as you explained, that effort to basically retrieve the money is why they arrested me in the savage-like manner they did. And unfortunately for them, the money they were never able to retrieve the money, and it's probably going to be traced back to the special counsel or even the FBI itself, and that's a big problem.
George, Roxanne Wilder here, and I just want to share with our listeners this quote. An agent says to you during this time when they're investigating you, this is what happens when you work for Trump. What did you think when you heard that?
What I thought when I heard that, coming off a transatlantic flight, and I was expecting to basically fly back to Chicago, drop off some stuff, get on my clothes, and move to New York, where I had an interview with Fox News. And the last thing I expected was that agents would be waiting there for me, sneering me and telling me, without telling me why I was being arrested, that this is what happens when you work for President Trump. So immediately upon that situation at Dulles Airport by these, what I think were some corrupt bad apples in the FBI and probably Mueller's team as a whole, I knew that this was they were going for Trump. They were going to try and squeeze me and others to get him. And they were looking for scalps immediately. They weren't looking for justice. They were just looking to make President Trump look bad. And, should certain things have gone differently, and if I had fallen into some of these incredible traps that they set for me and probably others, we might be looking at a much different situation in this country today. So that's all I could say about that.
Well, George, you have such an incredible story. We're so happy you're sharing it with us today. And it does have a happy ending in the sense that through all this, you met your wife.
Yes, I did. I met my beautiful wife through this. She's been an incredible person and a great supporter of mine. And, if it wasn't for her, we probably wouldn't be talking today. My book wouldn't be out. And I'd probably be somewhere hiding, licking my wounds and trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life because, she really gave me the courage and the voice when I didn't have a voice, actually. I'm not sure if you remember, but she was always on TV. And, she gave some pretty interesting interviews before I could even talk that kept a lot of intrigue in my story. And, but we're happily married. We're in Los Angeles now, and things are great. But it was a very difficult process to get from where we started to now. But God works in mysterious ways.
That's amazing, George. You have such a great story. Now, what are some of your plans for the immediate future?
So I spent the last 7 months or so writing my book, and it just came out a couple months ago, so I'm currently still on my book tour. I'm going to be doing some more speaking over the next months or so, and quite frankly, I want to get back into public service. There's been some interest by the party to float the idea of me running for Congress here in California and some of the districts once things become a little more clear and Durham's and Barr's investigations completely exonerate me, which I think they will. And now that the president openly supports me on Twitter, which he has, and obviously conservative media and people like Rush Limbaugh and other massive platforms like that have openly suggested I do it, I'm looking into that myself, but I haven't confirmed that yet. And right now, I'm basically supporting my wife too, who's she's acting here. She's an actress in Los Angeles. So we're taking things one step at a time, and but certainly public service is something I want to get back into in the medium term at the earliest.
Well, I think you were born for it. I think your level of maturity just shines through in the book. I mean, it's an amazing level of groundedness and maturity for a gentleman of your age. You're still a fairly young man. And, to be able to have all this thrown at you, and, you behaved very diplomatically throughout all of these incidents with all of these folks who allege themselves to be diplomats, but it turns out are just crass spies, and that really shines through. So I think you got a very bright future. And let me just put in a plug here for the Tampa Bay area because we have one of the largest Greek communities in the whole country. If you get the chance to come here to Tampa, come down and visit us in Tarpon Springs. I bet you're going to find a lot of supporters down here, and certainly something that we on the Morgan Streetman Show would love to be involved with you.
Oh, that would be wonderful, and yes, I'd be very happy to do that. And please, let's definitely coordinate something like that because the Greek American community has obviously been very supportive. I'm part of that community in many ways. Obviously, my parents are from Greece. And I've heard great things about Tarpon Springs and wonderful food down there. So I'm always up for a great Greek meal down there and to meet some great people, and including yourselves in person. So be happy to do that. Thank you.
Fantastic, George. We look forward to it. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. It was a big treat for me in particular.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
All right. Well, folks, I mean, you can't beat that right there. Now, I'm in heaven. George Papadopoulos just came on and told us all about his book, Deep State Target. You got to get the book. You got to read the book. It's written at a place where everybody can read it. Everybody can understand it. George is such a down-to-earth guy. He's got an amazing story. And, folks, I mean, I couldn't highly recommend enough that you go out there on Amazon and you get George's book. You're going to learn some things that you haven't even learned from us, and it's going to blow your mind.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.